Up, everyone? Welcome to my talk today titled Scaling Developer Efficiency with Workflow Automation through gitStream. I'm Dan Lyons. I'm one of the co founders and COO at LinearB. I'm also the host of the Dev Interrupted podcast. Highly recommend you check out both of those if you haven't yet. And if you're into this type of stuff, there's a lot of cool material there for you to check out for free. This slide is super important because it really gives the context for a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in my talk today. In this data, what you're seeing here, where it says code is getting stuck here, this is actually coming from the LinearB community. We have the luxury that we've now been analyzing millions and millions of branches and pull requests, and our data team is able to do an analysis of really where is code getting stuck. Is it more on the coding side? Is it more on the PR pickup side, the PR review side, or the deployment side? And the thing that was really interesting that we found out, we didn't really know this before, is that actually the code in an area that developers are having a very poor experience across the community right now is in that pull request pickup and the pull request review areas. And this is cycle time. That's what it really is showing you here end to end. If you're familiar with the DORA metrics, this is cycle time. And so when we say 9 hours of pickup, that's how long a developer is waiting on average for their code to start being reviewed, their PR to start being reviewed. And we say 5 hours review. That means once the review is actually started, it takes about 5 days for that code to be reviewed. And obviously, that's a really long time. That's almost, the entire week after I put up my PR. And it leads to a really frustrating experience for developers. It leads to low quality. It leads to a lot of cognitive load shifting. So that's the mission that we set out to solve with gitStream, which is a tool I'll be showing you here. The other thing from a data perspective, if you're into data type stuff, the other thing that we found from this analysis is most pull requests are idle a very, very long time of their lifespan. So on the left-hand side here, it says 50% of PRs are idle for 50% of their lifespan. And when we say idle, it means the PR is opened, it's not moving forward, it's not being reviewed, it's not progressing. And on the right-hand side, 33% of PRs or MRs are idle, about 78% of their lifespan. And when that's happening, code is getting stagnant, it's getting old and stale. As you all probably are aware, you're moving on to your next task. Developers start moving on to their next thing. And when dev teams aren't merging, the experience that they're having is really suffering. So this is some other data points that we found and where we kind of got inspiration to create this tool, gitStream, which I'll be giving you an overview of here now. And so at the end of the day, what does this gitStream automation actually do? Through code, and you can see some of the code here, it allows you to classify pull requests or classify code changes and then take an action on them and do the right thing with them. And when I say classify, there's a range of different ways and different criterias that you can assess what type of content is in that PR. Is it something really, really simple, like a documentation change, or is it image change? Is it something really high risk and really complex, like it's touching a sensitive, like authentication layer, or something that you would be concerned with from a security standpoint? And the key that we found in the community is when you start classifying these pull requests by their different characteristics or by risk, you can then start treating each one of them differently. And that's very different than what most engineering organizations or companies doing today, where they're treating every single PR exactly the same. It has to have at least one reviewer, or if you're working at like a bank, maybe like 3 reviewers. And that really slows down the process and is just like not a smart and in tune way to do the right thing, because every pull request is actually very, very different. So I'll show you a few examples of what the community is doing with gitStream today. This slide here around scaling efficiency, standardizing your PR process. What we found is most of the implementers of gitStream, usually they're interested in either moving faster. So again, you might be in an organization where it's like every PR has to have 2 reviewer policy for each repo. Usually that type of platform engineer, developer team is coming and using gitStream to say, okay, let's not do that for every single PR. That's really overkill. It's hurting. It's like wasting our time. We're not really getting much out of it. Let's do something to move faster. So that's more on the improving velocity side. You also might be in a situation where there really isn't any standardization in place. Quality is suffering. Maybe PRs actually aren't being reviewed the way that you want them to. So that's more on the quality side. And then if you are someone that's working at, usually this is like larger organizations, fintech, anything that has to do with like money or government related stuff, compliance becomes a really, really big deal. That's probably the third way that people are utilizing gitstream. But I'll focus a little bit more on moving faster, which is always amazing for developers, and then on the quality side as well. So the first thing and the most basic thing, and there's documentation available for all of this. If you go to docs.gitstream.cm, you have a little example there, but you can check it out for yourself. Adding context to the pull requests, our data shows, saves developers tons of time. And when I talk about adding context, what do I mean? The example right here, very simple. A little estimated time to review label, a 5-minute review. It might be a 10-minute review. It might be a 15-minute review. This is a piece of functionality that comes out of the box with gitstream. Just by adding that label, that piece of context for the reviewer, it allows them to say, is this something that I can review really quick? Is this something that I need to block off like an hour for? I have 15 minutes, before lunch. Can I get this done? Because the worst case situation is that I'm starting my review and I'm not finishing it. That's actually the most frustrating thing. That's when we lose, basically just waste the most time. So a simple piece of information like how long will it take to review, again, that comes out of the box with gitstream, goes a long way. Now, you can get much more, of course, advanced with what you want to label. So, for example, if you're using security tool like Sneak, something like that, if you're using Sonar for quality, whatever you're using, you can, gitstream actually integrates with both of those, and you can start labeling, I think, even more interesting things like, hey, vulnerabilities found, or for example, hey, a security, like a critical vulnerability found, let's label it in red, let's show it. I think we have it in a later example, but let's assign a security reviewer. More context about the PR goes a long way for the reviewer. The other one that we show here is around formatting. You can say like, okay, this is just a formatting change, or just like a docs only change, or like a test only change. Again, the more information that you put out there, the better for the reviewer coming in. And that's probably the most basic way to use gitstream. Now, there's also, I think, more interesting ways instead of just like the beginner label stuff. The other thing that we see in the community is the use of an auto review and approve. So, for example, there's a lot of PRs out there that actually are not really high risk changes at all. It might be test only change. It might be something that's behind a feature flag and not actually going to impact prod. It might be, a UI change or something really, really small, a color change. And instead of bothering another developer, pulling them away from their work to say, come and review this thing, and then get like a looks good to me, why did you move me away from doing the work that I need to do? You can set up these rules within gitstream to detect these low risk situations, have gitstream do an auto review if all tests have passed, if there's no vulnerabilities found, that type of stuff. Let's auto review and approve. And that's really going to increase your velocity. You might also use a rule criteria like, all tests have passed, no vulnerabilities, expert code owner making the change, and the change is like 3 lines or less. That's another thing that I see. So these are things that are really going to help with velocity. If I move over to the quality side, and we're kind of ripping through these, pretty quickly here. Again, all of these examples are available at docs.gitstream.cm. On the quality side, there's an interesting piece of functionality that comes with gitstream around adding the right reviewer. So that's going to take a look at git blame. It's going to take a look at the latest commits. It's going to put together who has the most knowledge or who would be most eligible to do this review. And you have two options here when you use this type of functionality. One option is you can just comment on the PR and say, hey, here's the list of reviewers that is recommended, and then you can assign it yourself. I think you can see that here on the left-hand side. Or what a lot of people are doing are saying, hey, just gitstream, let's assign the right reviewer based on that activity and blame and so on. So that's something that I think is really, really cool, finding the best reviewer to review your code, especially if you're working with a bigger team. Another thing that's interesting on the quality side, if you're having some of those issues, bugs found in production, we want to tighten the screws a bit, you can require X amount of reviewers based on the risk of the PR. So, for example, in most cases, maybe you want one reviewer. We talked about the situation where you want an auto review where it's really low risk. But you can start doing things like, hey, if the estimated review time is like 30 minutes or longer, and there's a lot of files being touched, 5 or more files, 10 or more files, and the code change size is like 400 or more. In those situations, I've also seen companies say, hey, a vulnerability is found, from Sneak or Sonar, even if it's like medium risk, let's assign a security reviewer. In those cases, maybe then you want to say, let's have multiple reviewers. Again, that's not for every single situation, but for some situations, that can be great. And therefore, you have a range of possibilities. You're not just requiring 2 reviewers every single time. That's an overkill. You're saying when there can be 0 reviewers or an auto review, 1 reviewer, or 2 reviewers. And I see gitstream used for that a lot. The other thing that I see on the quality side is around requesting changes. So when a developer puts up the PR, gitstream can do analysis based on your desire. There's an example here on the left-hand side where we can say, hey, this function that you're using, actually it's deprecated, or we're trying to deprecate it. So before someone is coming into actually a human do the review, we can send a request change back to the developer and say, hey, for example, we're not using this function anymore. Can you use this other one? This is a great way to save time. Again, you don't want to have other developers, reviewers stop doing their work and say something really, really quick like, hey, you're using the wrong thing. All of that should be automated, and you can do that with gitstream. Last but not least, I kind of mentioned this throughout the talk, but I think the integration and the idea of using your favorite tools, as it says here, is super, super powerful. So you can start setting gitstream rule criteria based on, in this example, from Sonar, bugs found, vulnerabilities, code smells, security hotspots. If there is a security hotspot, make sure someone from the security team is reviewing. You can hook up your test coverage. If you're in a situation, hey, this is actually only like 60% test coverage and we require 80% or 100%. Send a change request back saying, hey, you got to get this up to 80, 90, 100, however your team is working. I think combining gitstream, the development teams that I've seen doing that with tools like Sneak and Sonar, this is where I see probably the coolest things happening in our community. So thanks everyone for listening to the talk today. If you are interested in this type of stuff and want to get started, all of this is free. You can go to gitstream.cm. And like I was saying before, you can check out docs.gitstream.cm. And also, if you're interested in all of this type of stuff around improving development workflows, check out Dev Interrupted, which is our free community and podcast. Thank you again for listening to my talk today, and I hope you have an awesome time at the conference.